course, September 11th. And there is nothing that I can say that would add to the solemnity of this day. It's our generation's Pearl Harbor. We are not ever going to forget this day. But we should all bear in mind that the United States is under attack continuously. Although it's not anywhere near as dramatic as those events 19 years ago, these attacks are every bit as dangerous to our country. As the promotional material for this meeting stated, the war is taking place in cyberspace. And some of the enemy forces are criminal gangs that are just out to make money. Others, however, are groups that either work directly for nation states or are sponsored by them. And their target is the American economy, and your business is in their crosshairs. Why? I will let our three experts on our panel explain that. So let me introduce them to you. First is Chris Shull, the president of Engaged Impact. Chris helps companies understand their greatest risks and then helps them identify and implement cost-effective solutions. And Chris will talk to us about the criminals and spies that are after your clients, why you are an easier target than your clients, why your systems could be used to hack your clients, and why you're highly vulnerable, but how you can make improvements. Anthony Mongeluzo is president of PCS, a managed services provider firm in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. Did I leave anything out there, Anthony? No? Got it all? Okay. PCS provides a host of services to small and mid-sized businesses, including help desk support, data backup and protection, technology support, and network management. And Anthony will discuss antivirus and malware solutions and advanced solutions such as Carbon Black, phishing and ransomware attacks and how to prevent them, people, which is the easiest thing to hack in your organization, and the training your team needs to identify these attacks. Last, but certainly not least, Austin Morris Jr. Austin's president of Morris Risk Management, LLC. Morris Risk Management provides a full portfolio of insurance products and services in addition to advanced risk management solutions. MRM specializes in cyber liability insurance, technology error and omission insurance, and provides advice on related cybersecurity matters. And Austin will present a holistic approach as the best cyber risk solution. As risks and exposures change, so should your organization's protection strategies. Cybersecurity is a team activity with customizable parts, and cyber insurance is a necessity, not a luxury. As they go through their presentations, I'm sure you're going to have questions. Please put them in the chat, and I'll collate them for the end of the presentation. But certainly we hope to foster an open discussion as well towards the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Chris.
Thank you very much, David. Sharing my screen here, the right window. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now. And as David said, I run a small company called Engaged Impact. It is me, and I help companies figure out how to up their game in cybersecurity. To that end, I want to talk. My job here is really to make you all very afraid, so that you will call Anthony and ask him for help addressing these problems. If you are very afraid but you don't understand what your problems are, you can call me and I'll help you figure out what they are, and then we'll bring in Anthony or who knows. But what are the dangers? And so the one everybody hears about all the time is ransomware. That's in the news all the time now. And what is it? If you haven't been paying attention, it is where the hackers get some software onto your computer and encrypt everything so that your system doesn't work and all your information is gone. And to get it back, you have to pay them of dollars, thousands of dollars of Bitcoin. If you were at a big company, it could be millions of dollars of Bitcoin. And and if you do pay, you get some keys that allow you to unencrypt all your storage. But the truth is that sometimes it isn't really ransomware. It's what they call wiperware, which is they just encrypted everything and threw away the key, and now you cannot decrypt it. So your data is gone, and you paid the ransom, and you're not getting it back. And so this is a very scary thing. And I will also talk a bit more about it in a minute. But another thing everybody should be worrying about is mailbox hacking or hijacking or hostage taking. And so with mailbox hijacking, people typically, most companies and especially most small companies are no longer running their own email servers. They're using Microsoft Office 365 or G Suite. And there might be a few other vendors out there, but those are the dominant ones. And so everybody knows exactly what your login screen looks like because it's one of those two. And so they will send you some kind of email, and you're going to click on the link because it's very convincing. And some of them are stupid, and we'll forget about those. But the ones that are good are very good sometimes, and you will fall for it. I mean, I'm a cybersecurity expert, and I fall for tests every once in a while. I mean, usually they're not the ones that I'm sending out to my clients, but sometimes I'm working for a company that will phish test me, and it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally I have fallen for one. I give you an example very quickly. I was working for a company, and I got a LinkedIn invitation from the company president into my work email address. And I immediately clicked accept, which is really weird because LinkedIn is not connected to my work email address. It's only connected to my personal email address, and I don't get those invitations in my work email address. But it was from the company president, it was from LinkedIn, and I fell for it. Will never happen again. So, and the problem is when you do that, you can lose control of your mailbox. And people will the bad guys will sometimes take your mailbox and start using it to send emails out to all of your friends. I'm sure you've all gotten one of those emails from one of your friends that says, hey, I'm in London and I was robbed and I lost everything. All I have left is, my phone. Could you wire me some money? And that's probably because that friend's email account was compromised, and then it's being used to attack all their friends in what's considered to be a really credible way. And sometimes, fairly rarely, instead of using that ploy, they will actually try to get you to pay them some Bitcoin to, they're going to change the password on your account. And they might give it back to you if you pay them. And, that's a bad situation to be in. Number 3 is things to worry about is this CXO, sometimes CFO, CEO wire fraud, vendor wire fraud, customer wire fraud. And I was telling some of the people before we got started today that I was working with a mortgage company a couple of years ago where they would have people hack into their accounts, sort of like number 2, but instead of changing the passwords, they would just create a forwarding rule in the email box where they would forward all the message traffic somewhere else. And then when they saw a real estate closing coming up and there was a wire transfer involved, they would insert right at the last minute, copying only the people who were paying the money, not the people who were receiving the money, a new instruction saying, don't wire the money to that other account. Like I told you before, here's the new number you need to use and make sure you do it by the end of the day. And so, in multiple cases, tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars were transferred to the bad guys. And if you've got a Monday closing and they tell you that you need to transfer the money by the close of business Friday, and you do, there's a decent chance you will not get your money back, because if you can detect this within 36 hours, the FBI can use, if you can report it to the FBI within 36 hours, they can often claw the money back. But after that, over a weekend, you're in trouble. So 4, 5, and 6 are all variations on the same theme, which is just simply stealing information. And, so if you've got a lot of personal information of your customers, your clients in your mailbox, which a lot of people do because email is sometimes a filing cabinet. If you have a breach of your mailbox, much less your other systems, if you have a database system or a Salesforce account or, an accounting system, heaven forbid you have a clinical behavioral health system where you have healthcare data, and your account is compromised to one of those systems, you have a breach of personal information, and there are a lot of legal implications for that. And so not only do you want to prevent it as best you can, but it's going to be especially important for you to talk to somebody like Morris about getting the insurance to cover the really enormous costs of complying with all the laws. You may have clients, or your own company may have intellectual property that could be stolen. I was working with a medical devices company a few years ago that had, trade secret stuff. And they were very afraid that, if their systems were compromised, that some Chinese company could obtain these trade secret information about how they made their thing. And all of a sudden they'd have a new competitor that made exactly the same thing and didn't have to do any of the R&D to actually develop the methodology. And then there's just the theft of confidential information. We saw this a few years ago with the Pentagon Papers, the Panama Papers, where a law firm in Panama that did a lot of shady but allegedly legal transactions to hide money for very wealthy people had their accounts compromised, and a whole lot of information about a whole lot of very rich people who were tax sheltering money was revealed. And so, you don't want to be that Panama law firm that lost that information and it became public. Let's see, next page. There we go. So how do people accomplish these bad outcomes? I mentioned a little bit about the phishing attacks. What you may not also know about are vishing, smishing, and smishing. Phishing. So phishing is email, attacks. Vishing is where they use voice calls to do the same thing. Smishing with a SMS is text-based phishing. I'm sure you've all gotten some text messages that say, hey, click on this link to X. And it can be either win a prize or enter a contest, or it can be by the way, anybody wants these slides, they're welcome to them later. Just let me know. or it can be the warning message that your account's going to be disabled if you don't, click on this link right now. And then the other smishing, SM-ishing, is social media phishing. And so there are people who post stuff in Facebook and, LinkedIn and Instagram and all the other, social media places that people sometimes hang out, that if you click on that link, bad things will happen. What most of those are trying to do is either steal the credentials to one of your accounts or download and install some malware onto your computer. And, that malware will then allow some of that other stuff to happen in terms of stealing the information or doing ransomware. There's something called a remote access Trojan, known as a rat, where essentially the people who have installed the malware gain access to not only your whole computer and the contents of it as you think about it, but they also get access to your camera and your microphone and every single keystroke you make and everything that shows up on your screen. And so if you don't have one of those little things that you can flip down in front of your camera, you might want to get one of them, or a Post-it note. And you should definitely not allow anybody to install a remote access Trojan on your computer. There are all kinds of ways of social engineering people, whether it's, I don't know if you've got one of those phone calls lately that says, your Apple or your Google or your Microsoft account is going to be closed if you don't call back right now or press 1. And they're all just attempts to get you to do something that isn't in your own best interest. I'd ask for a show of hands if I could. If we were in person, as it is, I can only see 6 people. So, but unpatched and out-of-date systems are a huge problem. If anybody's still running Windows 7, please find a way to make the investment to upgrade to Windows 10 this year. Windows 7 is no longer supported, and if you are still running one, you're probably going to get hacked in the coming year. Even if you're running Windows 10, if you're one of those people that doesn't like to give your computer permission to install the upgrades automatically, you should, I encourage you to start letting it set it up to automatically install the updates and patch the software, because even Windows 10 has vulnerabilities that need to be patched. And then just because it's the year of COVID, working from home is a different thing. And, I think this probably affects Beacon members less than many bigger companies. But, if you're one of those companies that has suddenly gone to work from home or earlier this year and told people to just use your personal computer and you can connect in, those work from home computers, if they're not company owned and managed, you don't know what they are. They could be a Windows XP machine, which is fully compromised, and everything the person is doing on their screen to work from home is being captured by the bad guys. And then just sort of the work environments too. If you work with confidential information, healthcare information, financial information for your clients, making sure that other members of your family aren't listening in on your conversation about somebody's, gout or whatever it is, pick a terrible disease. You don't want to allow that to happen as well. So just very quickly, let me define a few things for you before I wrap this up and turn it over to Anthony. Let's just worry about the security, the threats, the vulnerabilities. I'm going to focus on events, incidents, and breaches where events happen all the time, but they don't matter because they get blocked. Incidents are things that start to happen, but then are contained. And breaches are the things that compromise security in non-trivial ways. And in terms of the threats we've seen, it's the phishing and the malware. The stuff in red here is stuff that's 3.5 times more phishing since COVID lockdown. And so work from home is now an acronym, or WFH. And these are a whole bunch of things that people need to worry about. And so I'm not going to talk about how to patch these things so much, but there are lots of different vectors of attack into your computers and your information. And then I sort of mentioned these examples in terms of events or things that start to happen but are blocked, or actually they don't even start to happen. The incidents are things that start to happen but are blocked. Say, some malware that starts to run, but then your anti-malware software kicks in and blocks it. It's somebody mentioned earlier they had someone who had received a wire transfer request and had started to comply with it, and but then didn't follow through. And so that's sort of an incident, but it's not really a breach. And then there's some of these other breaches that I'll mention. I'll also mention here with ransomware, which is, if you go back to our definition of security, ransomware traditionally affected the integrity and the availability information. But increasingly, the ransomware software people are extracting your data and they're stealing your data, which affects the confidentiality of your information. And that's an extra lever they have against people to make sure they pay the ransom fees. And with that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Anthony so that he can talk about, what you're going to do about this. Anthony, take it away.
Great. I'm going to share my presentation here. Everyone can see, hopefully. So, good morning, everyone. And I will say this is I call it a trim down just due to the time user training session for cybersecurity. I get to really see this full circle because I own a couple companies related to technology. And, my main business is we're an MSP, a managed service provider. And what that means is we go in and we basically take the role of the CIO and the help desk, and we navigate our clients through, all the different challenges of technology, the strategy, and, making sure they're protected. But on top of that, out of Westchester, PA, I own a cybersecurity and e-discovery company. So we get paid to be the bad guys, right? So we're the good guys, but we get paid to do what the bad guys do. And we do everything from picking locks at your business to, cracking into your hardware, taking advantage of your staff by social engineering, and then basically documenting it so that, hopefully we're the only people that get into your network. So what I will say on the first slide, back to antivirus. So you had a lot of choices, ton of choices out there. I hate to say it, antivirus is almost a necessary evil. It protects you, but it's the bare minimum these days. The one that I've seen is the best is WebRoot. There's a lot of good products out there, and if we have this talk 2 or 3 years from now, I'll probably give you a different one. I feel like every 3 to 5 years that there's a different leader in antivirus. Symantec was very good for quite a while there. Kind of fell off. AVG, they hit the States pretty hard. And again, look, you're not going to go wrong with a lot of these different things, but what I found is that WebRoot can detect some more emotet and different types of strains that it might not fix them, but at least it'll let you know there's a problem.
Anthony, we're still seeing your title screen.
I didn't change anything. Let's see. Yeah, it's not letting me go into the presentation mode. It's got to be something with the Zoom software on this monitor because I can't hit play. I'll try to unshare one more time then. That's weird. Now Zoom is completely crashed on my screen.
I think we're seeing your screen actually.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to exit and come back in. Zoom, I can't even access.
Huh.
It has to be this monitor because it is not happy.
Well, Anthony, we can see you, so why don't you just go right ahead?
If you turn off sharing, oh, he just disconnected. He's gonna.
Yep, I just disconnected, and I'm just trying to come back in. Like I said, I think it's the monitor with software. I haven't had a problem with Zoom before, but yeah, first slide.
There you go.
Yeah, something's crashing out though. I've never seen Zoom respond like this, and it's the first time since I got this monitor. So can you see email text?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So just to finish the last slide off, though, I'm not going to scroll back to it. Malwarebytes is something that you do want to get for malware protection. That was like what Chris talked about earlier, just, some of the software, ransomware, malware, they put it on your system and they basically take advantage of your technology to take advantage of you. The last thing that we have, and, I'll be honest, I don't want to spend the money. I have it on every computer PCS. The number one way to really supercharge and really protect yourself is use a piece of software called Carbon Black. It's basically a competitor to CrowdStrike. I find the software a little bit better. They team up with a group called Red Canary that will actually make it much easier to read, and a lot of companies will use it. The problem with Carbon Black is, depending on the number of computers you have, it's anywhere from $12 to $20 a system. So it gets expensive. I mean, my Carbon Black bill, we get a good rate because we're like a referral partner, blah, blah, blah. I still think like $1,700 a month. That being said, I'd rather spend $1,700 a month than be on the front page of a newspaper that we got hacked and let our clients down. So that would cost a little bit more. Second thing, email attacks. I still can't believe that I actually speak about this because, we all know about the Nigerian prince, and we all know, don't click on emails, don't do this, don't do that. These email attacks still work. It's a really easy tool. It's a free tool. A lot of people do different things like use their company emails, especially if you're an employee somewhere. If you don't own the business, do not use your company email to sign up for anything. If you didn't get a package or anything coming from FedEx, UPS, or if there's a voicemail that comes into your network that is not your phone system, it's probably not a real voicemail. Those little bit.ly links, they're smaller versions. Instead of going like Pro Computer Service or Help Me PCS, goes to like tiny.ul.com. Hover your mouse over that. Make sure it's actually taking it to you, to the site that it's going to. A lot of times, and there's a very common one where people are getting hacked through, they want your Office 365 link, or, hey, we sent you a Dropbox file. When you click on those emails and you put your name and password in, that's where you get hacked. What I also say is, too, last bullet point, don't let curiosity get the best of you. Anytime, it's like the stock market, right? FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. You need to respond quick. You've been compromised. I need your password. Anything that elicits an emotion is going to be something that is probably not good. I'll give you one quick LinkedIn story, and that'll be the last of the stories. We were engaged by an international company to hack them, and we simply used LinkedIn. What we did was we figured out their organizational chart, who was the CEO, HR, IT, all the people. We gathered all that information. We sent a fake resume in to their HR department who wrote us back. So now we have their email format because we knew the HR person's email was first initial, last name of that company. We had a copy of their email signature. On their website, they had nice pictures of their shirts, like mine right here with my little logo. We printed out some shirts, and we started to invade. We sent an email to their entire company from their HR person. We bought a domain that was one letter off from their domain name, so I'll use an easy one. It wasn't this company. Let's say Goodwill. Well, we might buy goodwill.com with 3 L's. We know what their email signature looks like because we got that back from the HR person. We sent an email to everyone on the LinkedIn. Hey, you know how bad cybersecurity is, and the criminals are coming in. Please click on this secure link. Put your password in. We're going to make sure it passes the insurance requirements. Well, guess what? About 35% of people clicked on that link and gave us their password. The only problem was when they clicked on the link, it wasn't their website. It was their website that was one letter off. We duplicated their website because it's really easy to do. It's public. It's on the web. And people willingly gave us their usernames and passwords. Now, granted, whatever password they typed, if they mistyped it, we get a wrong password, but we thank them for complying. It was that easy. Total cost was for the domains and hacking and all that, maybe $60, $70. For the coup de grace, we actually just physically walked in their building with their shirts on, with their logos. We had them printed. And we showed up at their IT meeting just to make it more impactful. And this was an international business. So again, email attacks worked, and it's kind of scary. So what I said earlier, what's the company's biggest weakness when it comes to security? It's people. That's who we hack. That's what we need to attack, because every Thursday Microsoft's putting out updates. Companies, when they find vulnerabilities in their products, they're releasing firmware. They're releasing more updates. So the only thing consistent that we're going to do is hack people. Quick, simple exercise for anyone in here. What's wrong with this picture? People go on Facebook all the time, right? What's your rock star name, your detective name, favorite color, favorite animal? What people are actually doing is using your social media to get your password reset questions. So now think about this. We go online, we tell them how many kids we have, we put our birthdays, we put our ages, and look, I'm guilty, we're all guilty of it, right? But the more and more information you get online, it's much easier. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the dark web scans, but I pay a small monthly fee to a Kaseya company, and I could run a whole dark web report on you. I could find out which one of your emails, username, passwords, what's on the dark web, what's out there. So now I could take that information combined with the information that you publicly put on Facebook, social media, Instagram, Twitter, and I could get into things. Lastly, just to wrap up, what I will say with social media, we all have to be responsible today, not only for the hacking and, you have geolocation services where you put pictures up, they tell you where you're at. This slide that I have here, I've been running with this slide for a couple of years. Right now the world's in a crazy place. You got to watch about hacktivists. One of my friends posted a political thing on his company. I don't know why he did it. He posted on his company's Facebook, and people went to his restaurant and wanted to beat him up. And it's on both sides. So you really want to watch what you're putting. You want to keep your kids off. You want to keep as much information off as you can, because once you put something online, I don't care if you put a tweet up for 13 seconds and delete it, someone's going to screenshot it, someone's going to have it. With LinkedIn, it's Facebook for adults, right? We all like to tell everyone what companies we're at, what titles we have. Go on my LinkedIn, you won't see DFDR. Go on my LinkedIn, you won't see TTR, you won't see ICS. You won't see these companies I own. I do have a few up there, but I do try to keep it a little bit more private, because we do different things with different organizations, and I shouldn't give people that stuff or that information. So LinkedIn, geolocation, all bad ideas. And lastly, what's the best thing you can do for your team? Training. There's services out there that do phishing training where they'll alert your team that, hey, you clicked this link, you did that, you shouldn't have done this. But whatever you can do, if there's any dollars you're going to spend, because I can tell you this, any organization, none of us have the budget to do what we need to do with all the cybersecurity and all the requirements. It's impossible. It's endless. But training your people, looking for these things, that's going to be, again, your best spend. So thanks. And if you guys have any questions, I'll be hanging on.
And that leaves us with Mr. Morris here.
Thank you, David. David, thank you for your earlier recognition of 9/11. That obviously is a very traumatic point in our nation's history, and we did a lot of things to improve our resilience after it and made ourselves stronger in a lot of ways. When I first got out of college, I immediately, the day after graduating from college, moved to New York City and just by happenstance got a job where the company's headquarters office was in the World Trade Center. So for several years, my office was in, I still have a business card from it, some other documents, which I saved for, just for memory's sake, but I worked in 2 World Trade Center in Suite 9808. That's the 98th floor, and that means Suite 8 on the 98th floor. So I had a real perspective of what it was like to be up there year after year, and the views, of course, but also the fact that you're up there in the clouds, and a lot of things happen for the people who are up in the higher parts of the towers, even lower parts. And after 9/11, the nation was really focused on terrorism, which should be, because we were vulnerable, and we had a lot of things we hadn't looked at. Our systems, our different departments within the government were not communicating. They were little separate towers, and they often kind of competed against each other. They were not working as a team. They did not have a holistic approach. But we've done a lot of good work since then. And our government now would say, and they do say this often, they probably will switch it, the FBI will probably switch to say the #1 threat to America is cyber threats in the future. And yes, we could have a terrorist event, but we are less likely to have one, and we'll have more damage probably from a sequence of cyber attacks, little ones, little cuts, 1,000 cuts story, or a big cyber attack maybe on the power grid or something, which would cause tremendous economic and personal losses and a lot of harm for our country. So cyber really probably is I believe is the biggest threat to our nation right now. And the first part of my conversation is called Risks and Exposures Change. Your organization's protection strategies should grow and evolve too. And that kind of fits what happened after 9/11. We did a lot of things, but right now, probably cyber is a bigger problem than terrorism is, although both of them should be recognized and watched. And when it comes to cyber, we need to pay attention. We live in a physical world, so a lot of times businesses say, well, I see my office and I see my team members and I see our parking lot and I see all these things, but they don't see what's intangible, which is often their networks, their data, their systems, all the ways they communicate with other organizations through cloud-based services and things like that. And businesses need to remember, and employers too, that they face increased liability. Cyber isn't just a problem that you have, it is your problem. Let's give an example. If we were to have an office, and all of us together work together, everybody on the screen is in an office, and we had some water damage in the back of the office, and we, gosh, okay, we had problems, but to get it fixed up and new carpeting and fix the wall. We know that the public doesn't need to know about that. We have to take care of that problem ourselves. But with cyber risks and data security incidents, we have liabilities to others. We've lost or had the information that we have entrusted to us by others, very valuable information. So we have liabilities, and we follow 50 different state laws, no federal cybersecurity law. So there's a lot to think about, and businesses are increasingly facing these increased exposures to liability. The costs are enormous. Chris touched on some of that earlier. And now what we're looking at with the work from home situation, we have many people working outside of the company networks, using unprotected equipment, grabbing the same cell phone maybe to check emails that their kid just played some game on that is totally full of malware, et cetera, et cetera. So the situation is getting worse, not getting better. That's not to be negative. It's a realistic appraisal of what's going on. So you don't want to be looking and saying, should we, as our organization, have been better prepared or done something differently if trouble comes for your organization or for your responsibilities to others. And if that happens, you can be sued. You can have regulators look at you and possibly fine you. There's a lot of bad outcomes that come from a cyber event. And you don't want to say, I should have done something different. I should have done something more. So that's an important thing. Think about this as being a day-to-day, week-to-week activity that never goes away. It's part of the resilience, and David, that's part of what your business focuses on, the resilience of keeping your organization going. So what you want to do is you always want to focus and prioritize cybersecurity, and you want to focus on business resilience, because a cyber event will almost always hit you sooner or later. We have so many clients who've had claims through insurance regarding cyber events they face, whether it's ransomware, data losses, stolen credit cards, intellectual property stolen. It just goes on and on and on. And if I was to show my hand moving up on the screen, the chart would show that there's just so much happening that it's so in the favor of the attackers right now, although there's plenty we can do to help protect our organizations. So do you really want to think about it conceptually? Do you understand your risks, the risks of your organization and your team well enough to prevent or at least mitigate or recover from a cybersecurity event. So again, the key words would be, can you prevent it? Sometimes you can. Can you mitigate it and reduce it? Sometimes you can. You want to have those first two happen. But if they do get through, or if some human in your team makes a mistake, because they're all going to be human mistakes, or possibly a malicious insider, you want to be able to recover from the event so your business stays in business and you're not somebody who's lost to the history books that event took you out and you couldn't make your bills, pay your bills anymore, your team, and you lost something you invested so much in, years and sacrifice. I believe that cybersecurity is the greatest threat to your bottom line today. The second part of my presentation is called Cybersecurity is a Team Activity with Customizable Parts. So it can seem overwhelming sometimes if you don't have Chris Shull on your team because he knows a lot, or if you don't have Anthony's team looking at what can we do technologically and so forth, it can seem overwhelming, but it's not overwhelming. It's kind of like when you pick up a new hobby. At first, you don't know anything about it. Zoe didn't know how to do pottery at one time, but now she knows how to make things, and she makes things for family and friends, and she's passionate about doing that. You can see it's part of her background. But you don't know how to do something until you get started. So I believe that really cybersecurity is something that every business needs to be responsible for, and it comes from the leadership team, and it is a team activity. And what does it mean when it's customizable parts? Well, don't we have to do everything? Only the biggest companies have the budgets and the resources and the actual capabilities within their staffing to do everything at one time without being lost. So smaller organizations, and probably that's who fits what Beacon would be focused on, are going to do a few things. I would say number one is you want to definitely do training, make sure your people day to day know what's going on. We've heard that before. To not click on things, constantly make awareness a focal point of your organization. You can eliminate a lot of your security risks by just doing a few of the things that I'll mention to you. You are never secure, you're never completely safe, and the attackers, whether they're targeting you or you just happen to be in the drive-by or randomly somebody introduces malware or something else because they clicked on something or fell for a social engineering attempt, you can eliminate a lot of your security risks by doing just a few things I'm going to say here. Really change your passwords, use legitimate passwords. People keep talking about passwords going away. And yes, we are moving away from passwords, but they're still here, and everybody here probably has a plethora of passwords they have in a filing cabinet or in their head. Don't use the same passwords at multiple sites, and don't use the same password over and over, and change them. Definitely patch your applications and your systems. Always patch, patch, patch. We heard before about, Chris said about having Microsoft do it, automatic updating. That's what should be done. Don't just say, well, I'll do it, I'll get to it, or I don't think I want to do it today. Let it happen automatically. You definitely want to have least privilege access. Everybody should have to defend why they have access to certain data or why they have access to information. Less information availability to everybody is a good thing. It's less vulnerabilities for your systems. And another part would be is actually think about a holistic approach. Have you really had a team conversation? You know, if you have a legal team, and we would include them. That would be Fred Wilf, who's also on this conversation. Is he your advisor, or is he your outsourced legal specialist? Are they looking at your documents and your agreements you have? Have you included your cybersecurity advisor? We have two experts on the screen right now. Have you had actually your compliance people? Have you had your leadership team talk? Have you had your HR department? Make it a team activity. It should not be pinpointed that one person is responsible for guarding everything, because how can they know what habits other people have, what they're going to do, and what data is out there that's being created, or what data is created long ago that nobody's even aware of? So it's a team activity. I'll talk much more about cyber insurance as I move towards the finish line, but cyber insurance is not a standalone solution. You don't just buy cyber insurance and say, we're good. Cyber insurance does a lot for you and has a lot of benefits. It's very reliable, but it's not a standalone solution. It's part of a comprehensive cyber risk management strategy. And that's, again, why it has to be a team activity, because what can be comprehensive if we don't have a team of people from different backgrounds, different parts of the organization? You could have a 3-person organization, but guess what? All 3 people should have pretty good awareness of what cybersecurity basics are. And you want to maximize the value of your risk management investment. If you bought some technology to help protect you, that's great. What are you using it? Are you updating it? Are you keeping it something that you're paying attention to the subscription? Have you actually had meetings at least quarterly or monthly, be preferred, about your company's 3-person or 3,000 person cybersecurity situation? This is the ongoing activity. It should never end. You can't say we did something and we're all set for the year. It is not like that at all. You have to do this all the time. We heard before from Anthony, and I completely agree with it, that your employees remain the weakest link in this security chain. There is a lot of social engineering going on there. The data about how successful it is staggering. And you have a lot of concern, you should have concern about malicious insiders. There are people who just want to do bad things to your organization. You are a part of your organization. Why? Well, they weren't promoted. They don't like the way things are run. Somebody offended them. Or sometimes people just want to see what they can get away with. Maybe there's monetary reasons why. If they can extract something from your system and they sell it someplace, they made some money on the side and they figure you'll never know. So don't underestimate the damage that somebody on your own team, who you're not actually aware is doing this, is causing to your organization. So what does this all look like? This is a lot to think about, but you really want to be able to say, let's start. Let's actually do a review with a specialist. Let's create a cybersecurity team with an organization. Let's do the basics I talked about before about patch management. Every company can do patch management. Every company can update their software. Every company can do some basic training. Every company can discuss these topics and make it part of your business model. So what is cyber insurance? And I'd say that my topic, the third part, is cyber insurance is a necessity. It's not a luxury. So cyber insurance is cost effective and dependable, but I want to let you know that the pricing is going up. There were times in the past couple of years where a company could gain a $1 million limit of liability cyber insurance policy for under $1,000. The insurance companies who are the leaders in this space, and there's hundreds of companies offering it, but there's probably only 15 to 20 who are excellent, I'll call it elite, and are creating the market by expanding their product services and coverages, and are the leaders saying this is what the market needs, this is what's happening in the cybersecurity field. That's what they're looking at. They understand the technology. They have tremendous resources in these companies. So the leading companies are paying the claims, of course, and they're doing a lot of good. But again, they're seeing spikes in claims that are staggering. I'll give you a number here from an insurance source I had that just talked with them earlier this week on Tuesday. Ransomware, which we know is a growing scourge, and Chris and Anthony have mentioned that, is growing so quickly that ransomware attacks for the insurance side have had a surge in 2020 of 47% in just one quarter. So ransomware costs that have been tied to insurance claims have surged by 47% in one quarter in 2020. That's how much it's going on. Ransomware, which increases in complexity and frequency and severity, is unbelievably popular tool that the attackers use, very common, very successful, and does a lot of damage. Again, please think about properly segmenting any of your backups from the network, because the attackers can get into your system. Ransomware, you say, well, I'll pull the hard drive, or I'm going to go and do a look at my backups. And if they're smart and they're talented, they're going to actually already take the time to know when you back up, and they're going to encrypt your backups too. So there's a lot of things you want to do about segmenting your network, your data, your system, but make sure you're doing a great job with your backups. Individually, for a company to get insurance, the insurance underwriters are getting more and more aware from all the data of almost 20 years of cyber insurance now of how they can make decisions about companies pretty quickly about their security posture and about its attractiveness, your company's attractiveness as a potential insured for cyber insurance. And so they can figure out pretty quickly what they think. They don't know who will have the event. It's just like healthcare insurance doesn't know who will have a health problem, but they know that based on certain demographics, your age and so forth, you're more likely to have an event. And the insurance modeling has done that on the cyber side. The cost of cyber events can be very high, and please know that a cyber event, unlike that water damage situation I gave you in the back of the office early in our conversation, cyber events can go on for months and months and months after the event's been discovered because of legal concerns, because of litigation, because of investigations, because of bad media, reputational harm situations. So much can happen that goes on for months and months. And I'm going to tell you that we've dealt with clients whose main job, the CEO, the CFO, different managers, their life became, what is my job every day? to respond to something that happened a week ago or months ago, which is a cyber event, which they're still working to clean up. They're not doing it. The specialists from the insurance side and their security teams and all those other advisors they've had over the years are helping them. But it's not something you just say, fix the drywall, pull the carpet up, new carpeting, put the coffee pot back where it was, and we're okay. This goes on and on and on, and there's such a disruption. In the cyber insurance world, the biggest two areas of claims right now, where the costs are two. We heard about ransomware, is the paying of the claim to either pay the ransom, which is in the case of extortion, or it's also the actual work around the forensics to figure out, can we beat the ransomware and the malware, and can we actually possibly decrypt, or can we restore the network without paying the ransom, restore all the data? The other area where the big claims are coming in right now is losses shifting to business income related. So people hear the news, oh my gosh, had a ransomware attack or had some cyber event. But what they don't pick up on is the company's not making money either. They're losing their income. And we have many companies right now, because of the current situation with the COVID and so forth, a lot of companies are in a financial situation that's fragile. So imagine what happens is not only can you not do your work, that's a horrible problem. You're not accessing your data. You probably can't even use your phone systems. The attackers are looking at you saying, pay up, suckers, or you're out of luck. Maybe, as Chris mentioned before, they've already deleted your data, and they're never going to give it back to you anyway. You can't even get it back, but they're playing a game with you. On top of that, you're not making money because you can't provide your services or product to your client because your supply chain's down, because you can't do your work. So the business claims are coming in now, companies saying, because of the cyber insurance business interruption coverage, can you pay, and they do pay, your lost income from the cyber event, and of course the costs around ransomware, including paying the ransoms. 2 to 3 years ago, even for small companies, you would see only $1,000 to maybe $5,000 ransom demands for a small company. We now see ransom demands, even for a small company, could be $10,000, $100,000, $500,000 for a small company, which they cannot afford. But the ransomers are assuming that there's some other source, maybe insurance, that would pay it. That's how dangerous this is. So really think about, again, as I mentioned in my first part of the conversation, what exposures do you have? What risk tolerances do you have? What risk will you accept and say, we're able to deal with that ourselves, we're comfortable with that? And what insurance coverage do you need? Cyber insurance is a specialty area of insurance. It's a complicated area of insurance. It ties in very much with technology, ties in with legal concerns, ties in with regulations, ties in with PCI, ties in with a lot of really interesting areas of vulnerabilities for companies. But it's very exciting to me because I find it to be an exciting, complicated, and also dynamic area of insurance. Cyber insurance completely complements technological defenses and cyber risk management strategies. It is not a competitor for the work that Chris would do, or Anthony's team would do, or what David does. It is not a competitor whatsoever. It completely complements them, because why? They're doing their jobs, guiding you and advising you. But when an event happens, and now there's trouble, who's going to pay the potential cost to get out of the spider web that you're in now? And that could be anywhere from $50,000 up into the millions. And that's how expensive it can be, even for small companies. The typical claim right now, even for a small company, can be over $300,000 for a little event. That's just how, because it goes on and on and on, and there's notifications and everything else. So yes, you could have a small one, or you could be into the millions, and it could devastate your company. The only way for many companies to survive is the insurance coverage and the response. So I'm going to just give you a couple little names of what some coverages might be, and then I'll wrap up. Cyber insurance also provides pre-breach solutions and partnerships. They're offering services from major global companies and saying, we'll do an assessment of something for you. We're not doing the work that Chris does or what David does or Anthony does, but they're saying, we'll give an assessment to you. We'll give you legal guidance on things that you should know in preparation for what could be a cyber event in the future. But some of the important coverages, and there's dozens of them, and they're always evolving, would be business interruption loss. I mentioned that before. You've lost income, not because your physical property's damaged or your employees are on strike or anything else. It's because you just can't use your network or systems. There's cyber extortion, which is the things we talk about, ransomware. You have data recovery costs. You can lose the information, but the insurance can pay to restore the data from files and tapes and backups and other places which have been scattered throughout your system. They can actually handle your data and network liability. You are liable to others if you've lost their data. That's very clear, and something you never transfer your liability to that third party. I want to make sure everybody understands that. People say, well, I have this service provider and they do this and this for us, so we're good and they handle the liability. No, if you took the data, if I take the data from Carol, who's on the screen, and Carol gives me her data, and I give it over to Kathy to do some work for me, I'm responsible because Carol trusted me. She does not know who I'm using on the back end or some other service that I'm hiring. So people forget that. These companies are staggered when they say, wait a minute, we're responsible for all this. That's a very important part. So that's your data and network liability. There's regulatory defense and penalties. Regulators are all over this. It's a great way for the government to make money and set an example. And then, of course, there's payment card liabilities, and it goes on and on and on. Cyber insurance, in summary, allows companies to recover and respond to events in ways they never could have themselves because they don't have the capacity to do it. They didn't have the money, the cash on hand to pay for the cost and to get themselves out of it. I want you to know that when a cyber event happens, it's not like buying a big piece of equipment for your office back in that physical world in the earlier part of this conversation, where you bought a piece of machinery or you sign a lease for an office and now you pay X per month and it's predictable. Many studies on the insurance side show that the cyber costs can sometimes be 80% of the costs can happen in the first few months. So let's say the bill is going to be for your event, it's going to be $315,000 for a small event. You don't spread that over the next 2-3 years and say, well, we can budget that. All your costs for all your notifications, maybe a call center, whatever it may be in your unique case, because again, it's a unique thing, is going to be happening in months, and companies don't have those resources. So that's why I would think that cyber insurance is a critical partner for your company, but also it plays well with the technological, plays well with the cybersecurity advisor experts, it plays well with the training and awareness specialty companies, it plays well with legal. Cyber insurance is a tremendous friend of your company, and it's really sometimes the best safety net when all else fails. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions later on if you're interested.
Thank you, Austin, and thank you also, Anthony and Chris, for sharing your expertise on this topic. We'll open it up for questions, and I'd like to lead off by asking all three of you this. It's very clear that people are the key in this problem. But the problem with people is that our excitement or interest or even fear of something diminishes with the length of time to which we're exposed to that stimuli. And while people might be interested, excited, fearful about cybersecurity initially, over time, that diminishes. What can we do to help keep this top of mind?
I think Austin hit on a very good point earlier, which was, if you do a once and done, I'm going to do my half hour or hour once a year. That's sort of the opposite of what you're worried about. What I've tried to do with most of my clients is actually make sure that there's a continuous, communication about cybersecurity, but to always try to make it new and fresh. And whether that means talking about a new real world threat or a new thing, sometimes it means highlighting an employee who reported something that was actually a very clever phish message and sort of forwarding that very clever phish message to the entire company saying, hey, look, this is something that one of our colleagues identified and didn't fall for. And, see how clever it is. And, kudos to Joe or Susie for not having fallen for it. And that really brings it home for people.
I think, David, just what I said before is that it's a team activity. It is really important to have that experienced, knowledgeable specialist, the kind of things that Chris does or you can do for companies or Anthony's team can do. But the company has to take ownership of it themselves. They have to say, we are responsible for this because this is our future. We like to work here. This pays for our mortgage. This pays to feed our children. Cyber is the #1 threat for most organizations. And without a real commitment to doing it year after year, day after day, month after month, be resilient, to be smart, and to grow your knowledge, that you're not going to win. And you want to win because your future is tied to your job. And that's how we are in our economy. Our nation is under attack, as you said in your opening statement, David, under attack. The theft of intellectual property off the chart, the damage to our companies and our economy, it could be unbelievably bad if some worse things happen that have already happened. but it's a never-ending threat. And the only way to actually do it, play well and to win more often and win big, is to play as a team, sharing information through partnerships. There's lots of institutions and organizations out there that share data on what's going on. People educate each other. There's informal networks, but also it's within your own company. Make sure everybody is part of the cybersecurity team. Even if their role is small, they're still part of the team.
As an HR person, I would also suggest it might be good to help people understand it can happen to even little companies, you know, that it's not just big and popular or flashy, because I know I've been part of groups where it's like, who would care about what we do? You know, we're nothing. We're not even plankton in the sea of life. So why would anybody be targeting us? Because, you know, we don't do anything of significance. So maybe some of those stories would help as you know, try to add new messages to keep it fresh and ongoing. A little fear, a little, you know, identity, like, oh, wow, they were just like us, might also help.
Well, one thing I'll jump in with too. I mean, I agree with, you know, everyone said about, you know, training the employees, phishing attacks, putting them out there. But to go to what you said, Dave, the other thing is going to keep it top of mind is the media. All you hear is every day what company got hacked, what company, you know, was compromised. It happened to Sony. It happened to the FBI. It's happened to so many. So I think that's going to keep things top of mind. And I can tell you, we work with a lot of insurance backend, a lot of big hacks that you don't even know happens.
Lori, the number one target isn't the big companies, it's the small organization, which is easy pickings. So people don't perceive that, but that's a story that they should have heard over and over and I think accepted. Anytime you go to any of these conversations like David's organized this morning through Beacon, people who are speakers are almost always going to say that, yes, the big name companies get in the news because we've heard of the big ones, but it's the little companies day to day who are the targets. And that's something people have to accept. It's not that you're invisible and they don't have to target you. You can just click on something and now there's malware that's actually tied to some application. You can have people who just say, I'm randomly targeting as many companies as I can through spam and things. There are so many ways that companies get hurt, but the little ones get hurt the most. And they are the ones who are most likely to go out of business or suffer severe damage to their company that maybe they can't recover from. It's the little company who should be worried the most.
I have a question for Austin. Given that so much of the risk is tied to people making error, you know, human error, are there times where your cyber insurance would not cover you and say, well, this was your fault, so we're not covering you? Or is that just, I'm just trying to understand if there's loopholes to what would be covered and not covered based on how the risk came into your organization.
Thank you, Zoe. It's a great question. Okay, so in general, as long as there's not fraud, okay, where a couple people along with management collaborated to actually have something happen and then try to get insurance money, okay, as long as that's not the case, that's not normal, then it wouldn't really be a problem if a company had an employee and people, team members, who made mistakes and caused the problem. Where would be a problem would be if the company was doing it, the underwriting had happened, and the company said, we have all of our employees are fully trained. That's not normal that most, all employees are fully trained. Or all employees have passed some certification that maybe Chris Shull has, okay? That's not normal. So if you had said that, that would be raising the bar and saying, we have more employee skill and awareness than is typical for any company, and that everybody's pretty smart about how to handle this. So the answer would be, no, there are not problems getting claims paid because humans make mistakes. What would happen would be if a company had a claim and then another 6 months later they had a similar claim, okay, where they had another employee who fell for the same thing, and then 6 months of that another employee, and each time the forensics and the investigation, because the insurance companies pay these big forensics companies to investigate to find out what happened in case there's lawsuits, and to know it's completely closed down. They want to say this event, from what we know, has been stopped. Doesn't mean you're not going to have another one. Doesn't mean there's one that we haven't identified yet somewhere in your network, but the current one that's our issue for the claim has been identified and stopped. If it happened where the company still had so many times the same repetitive problem, then the insurance company may say, we decide to either drop you as an insured at the end of the policy period. They don't drop you that day. They just drop you at the policy period. or they say we're going to actually put ratings on you to make you pay a lot more to cover your losses. But in general, human mistakes happen, and the insurance companies know that. They're well aware of the number one threat problem being human mistakes or human choices. We call it human decisions, malicious or this accidental, and the insurance companies pay the claims related to human activities. Only if something's just endless problem that one company is just every day it's the same thing, then it would raise eyebrows in underwriting and in the claims department.
I think there's another exception, which is from a very different angle, which is when it is one of these state-sponsored things. And I go back to the Petya, not Petya incident of a few years ago, where the President of the United States declared that this was an act of war against the world. And then some of the insurance companies went to the policies and said it excludes acts of war.
I'd like to respond. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, well, and that then became a legal case, because was that really a war, or was that just somebody saying something on social media? But
okay, I totally want to respond to that. That's kind of like a great point, follow up to what Zoe had, which is what's the things that maybe take this out of bounds. Okay, I think you guys will find this interesting. Every single type of insurance policy that I'm aware of, and we have many forms of insurance we write for clients, has something which is government approved. It's not they did it in the industry. It's government. There's something called a war exclusion. So if we're actually under attack, if Russia launches nuclear attacks against us, you can't look to the insurance industry and say, rebuild America. Okay, this is a problem that's excluded from your insurance policy. They're called war exclusions, and they're very common. It's in almost every policy. Now, back to what Chris had. Chris's point. There was a case that came out about a year and a half ago. Back in 2017-18, the Russians launched NotPetya. It's state-sponsored malware. The code is tied back to Russia. So they launched that. Their job is to disrupt the economy and the electrical system and everything of the Ukraine. And our government and the British government, after this whole thing was done, said, everything says this is state-sponsored and this is an act of war, but it's not like you're launching artillery shells over the border, and no tanks have crossed the border line, and no planes are flying above dropping whatever devastating bombs they could drop. They've done it through a cyber event. So what happened was there's a company called Mondelez. They're a big food company. They're about a $3, $5, $10, $20 billion company. They make chips and sodas and things like that, and beers and all that. You see their advertisements on TV quite often. They had no cyber insurance policy. This is all in the news, factual. They had a all risks property policy. Whoever was advising them was not doing the proper thing, in my opinion, because they did not have, as a multi-billion-dollar company with all kinds of data and all kinds of risk, they had no cyber policy. So what happens is they have NotPetya gets into their system and cause approximately $100 million of damage to their PCs, their servers, their infrastructure. It's a big problem. And they eventually recovered. They filed their claim with the insurance company called Zurich. It's like the city in Switzerland. And Zurich said, we're denying the claim. And the very few claims in the cyberspace, and I can say this with all sincerity and frankness with you guys, are declined. They just keep paying the claims because they fall within the policy parameters. Zurich declined, said, this goes back to an act of war. Did the Russians launch an act of war attack on Mondelez? No, they did not. But actually the code is tied to an act of war. And that code is what infected Mondelez, which caused all this physical damage to their infrastructure. Mondelez says we want to get paid for all of our damage. Zurich went and said, I'm not an attorney, just giving the generals I read this all the time, but this is what they said. We are imposing the War Exclusions Act, saying this is an act of war. Our government has said it's an act of war. And so where we are right now is that I believe that ultimately that one, Mondelez should have had a cyber policy, better have one right now. Number two is, I believe this will be court tested, and most likely Zurich would probably lose, because can we get our government officials to stand in courtroom and say, we actually are saying this was an act of war, not just saying it in the news, but actually saying it in a courtroom. So I think this would probably be reversed and Zurich would be in trouble. What will happen though is every insurance company is doing everything it can to make it clear that these property policies are not the place to look for your cyber coverage. So that's where that's a unique one. But back to Zoe's question and Chris enlarging the question with a great point. Cyber pays the claims. What gets in the news though is the exception when somebody says, but what about this case? Mondelez did not have a cyber policy, and the insurance company said, you know what, we're going to take this to court and see what we learn from this. That's where that one is right now.
I had another question slash thought. It was when Anthony brought up about how you answer those questions on Facebook and all of a sudden they have the answers to your security questions. Do you think that those questions are going to be replaced by like two-factor authentication or something else? Because I think it was Progressive. I was just updating something with Progressive Insurance, and it struck me how simplistic the questions were. Things that could very, very easily be found, not even from those answers to those questions. It was like the choices of the questions were so basic, like mother's maiden name. You could find that on Facebook. You know, what high school did you go to? What college did you, all this stuff readily available. And it just struck me that those questions were not secure whatsoever. So what's the new thing that's going to be instead of those questions?
Well, it's interesting because the National Institute of Standards in Science and Technology actually in 2017 came out with new guidance about authentication systems, the login systems. And they said, stop doing the 3 password recovery questions. They also said, stop not doing two-factor. And obviously there are a lot of places where you can still get away with not having two-factor. And there are more and more places that keep asking for more of these stupid questions. And, what I suggest is actually create a file for yourself with what I'll call a legend. And if you read spy novels, you hear about spies who are going into another country and they will assume a different identity. And that they have a whole legend that goes with that. And they went to a different high school and they grew up in a different town and they have a different favorite color and their mother's maiden name is, Snyder, not Ostrowski. And, and write down your alternate universe of questions. And, you have a different pet name, you have a different, first childhood pet, there's a long list of these questions. So I actually have 2 of these different identities that I use, and there are like 30 questions in each of them, and I add to them as I need to. And that way, if somebody, I have to remember which one, or usually you get 2 tries, but I would say for most people it would be simpler just to have one legend that is not what they put out on social media, and is not true at all. So, and sometimes you can do completely crazy things like your favorite color is applesauce. That's not a color. You can make up complete nonsense answers at that point, right?
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Zoe, back to Chris's great point. I also have a legend, but we're not obligated. Remember, you're not obligated to give information to a lot of places. Let me give you an example. For the office, about a year ago, we bought some new software, okay? And when we registered the software, we just bought a subscription. It's an annual subscription. The software company, it's a big one, people would know the name, asked for the birth date of the person who was actually, whose email address and who was the registrant, okay? And there's no reason why the software company needs the birth date. They just don't, but they're just gathering information for whatever reason, looking at demographics, whatever they're doing, big data, who knows? So we actually had that person came to me and said, what about this? I said, what's actually make up a fake birth date for you? They had never created a legend, as Chris wisely said to do, but we actually made up a fake birthday. We actually then took that fake birthday in the file with that software registration, which we had the printed receipt we paid for and everything. We actually have the person's name and it has their fake birthday. But you are not ever obligated to give these organizations your real information. They just ask for it. And that's kind of like phishing in a way. It's legal phishing. It's not malicious. I don't think this organization, who's a big company, we all know their name, is doing it to harm people. But why do they need that? They don't. So don't feel obligated to give people anything other than maybe the government and your healthcare provider. Everybody else can just get fake information or don't give them anything.
Any other questions for our esteemed experts here?
Yeah, I should just pile on. Zoe had actually asked a question about what comes after passwords and things like that. And, there are some of these other mechanisms that people are using, which are or companies are experimenting, which is everyone types differently, for example. And so they will actually not just record what you type, but the way you type it. And there's a certain speed at which you go, and there's a certain, certain character combinations flow off your fingertips faster than others. And it's sort of like a voice print of your typing. And so some companies are going to, instead of asking you for your password, they'll ask you to type in this phrase that changes all the time. And when you type it in, it's not really looking to see whether you are typing it in correctly. It's looking to see how you're typing it in. And, that's just one of many things that people are talking about in terms of cool new ways to avoid having to use passwords. I've seen numerous articles for 20 years that say that passwords are dead because they're too easy to be compromised or too easy to steal. Bunch of geeky people running around worrying about stuff like that. Thank goodness.
Yeah, they're actually doing that through Skype now too. A lot of times, hackers, if you're typing and your microphone isn't muted, they can actually pick up on your keyboard strokes and figure out what you're doing. So it's kind of creepy.
Well, it seems like we've.
I have a question for Chad, which is, what is the image in his photo?
A great question. I don't know. It's a raindrop into something. Maybe the background of an American flag, I guess.
Never would have guessed that.
Actually, I have a quick question. It's Kathy. To what extent should people and small companies know what's in the dark web about them?
I'll jump in just because I run the reports. It's important to know. I mean, it's one of those things that's kind of like war secrets, right? It's good to know that a bomb hit 10 minutes ago, but you would have rather known that 20 minutes prior. That's one of the main reasons why you want to really have different passwords and such for everything. I mean, dark web services, you could spend $5-10 a month and get an update every month, what's going on there. But really the best way to protect yourself with the dark web or with anything is, you can have a base password, but change it for your different websites, TD Bank, eBay, PayPal, because there's a lot of folks out there, they call them script kiddies, where they really don't know what they're doing. They get this computer script and all they do is go on the dark web, get your email address and password, and the computer script will then run that name and password against all these different sites. So again, as mentioned earlier, 2 factors of protection from that. If you get a text message on your phone saying, hey, here's your passcode to log into your Morgan Stanley account. I didn't try to log into my Morgan Stanley. That your information's probably on the dark web. So I think it's good to see what's out there, but I would also assume that your information's stolen out there. So just protect yourself and use different passwords as if it was already compromised.
The 3 credit reporting agencies all offer that as a service, and they will alert you to whether information about you has shown up on the dark web.
And I'm going to circle back to what Anthony was saying, which is using different passwords everywhere is very important because, I'll get these notices from, it turns out that the way I use TurboTax, they give me one of these monitoring services and I get an alert every month saying, or periodically saying, hey, we found your email address and password on some dark website. And, I think to myself, well, I changed that password recently and it is not the same as any of my other passwords because I use a password manager. And I would recommend very strongly that everyone use a password manager that generates automatically hard passwords and remembers and enters them for you so that you don't have to fuss with them. If you don't want to pay for one, It used to be that the password keeping features of your web browsers were terrible because they kept all those passwords in clear text. All the major browsers now encrypt those passwords so that I am now willing to recommend to people who don't want to pay the $100 a year or whatever it is for a password manager, that you use a poor man's password manager, which is to use, Chrome or Firefox or Safari or even Internet Explorer's password retention capabilities. They don't have quite the same power of the password managers because they only work within that browser. And they typically don't have the ability to generate a password for you that's unique and hard. But, better to just have it sitting there in the background remembering stuff for you than to say, hey, I'm just going to use my name spelled backwards with a number appended to it or something. Or password 123 is not one that you want to start using, just to be clear. And 1234 does not help.
All right, then. Well, thanks to our esteemed panel of Chris Shull and Anthony Mongeluzo and Austin Morris for joining us this morning. And
Beacon is the premier executive networking organization serving the Mid-Atlantic region. To learn more, go to beaconforlife.org.